In this fast-paced and highly competitive world, where the entire younger generation is thinking about startups, the primary resources that are required are the ideas, time, money, people, raw material, etc. And in order to function properly, every business organization, be it small, big, startup, or a medium size or anything, it requires working capital. And working capital is something that is needed for the proper functioning of the organization. And when it comes to the established businesses, it is really taken care by the seasoned finance professionals. But many a times, startups struggle to find some help in terms of managing the working capital effectively so that they can grow at the pace that they expect. Hello. Hi there. Welcome to the Guiding Voice podcast series. The Guiding Voice for a better future. This podcast is to help professional students, IT employees, and entrepreneurs to shape their careers. Dear listeners, in every episode, we interact with industry experts or thought leaders or academicians or coaches across the globe to drive some insightful conversations that will help each one of you learn great things. Also, we share an interesting trivia or a fun fact about the IT world or technology towards the end. Thank you for tuning in. This is Naveen Samala and with my co-host Sudhakar Nagandla. So folks, today we are going to discuss a very important topic, optimize startup funding. And we are pleased to welcome Charu to our show.
Hello. Thank you Naveen and Sudhakar for this opportunity to interact with your audience. I look forward to sharing what I know and learn during this conversation.
Thank you, Charu. A mechanical engineer working in finance, that is Charu Datta, who is helping micro, small and medium enterprises, MSMEs, that is, transform their business, and he mentors the startups. Charu has authored 2 books. He participates in various industrial forums to share his knowledge. Professionally, he is the managing partner of Suhrud Consultants and CEO of Groples Solutions. Charu, welcome to our show.
Thank you.
Okay, Charu, let's get started. How did it all start? Please share your professional journey so far. I'm sure you did not start as the managing director and the CEO, right?
Yeah. So if I really want to boast myself, then I can seriously say that I somewhere go close to Steve Jobs, right? So Steve Jobs in his famous Stanford address had said that you connect the dots and you don't really realize how things would happen eventually. So that's how the journey started for me as well. I became mechanical engineer by default because my cousin was a mechanical engineer and I always felt that I need to be a mechanical engineer. So it was something that happened by default. And when I actually passed, I realized that I'm really not good at actually doing the core engineering part, nor I was really good at doing anything onto the IT part. So neither coding nor the core work basically made me interested. So the only thing that really attracted me was basically people and working with them. So naturally, the job which was closest to this was sales. So I started in sales, worked for about 10 years in Pune, primarily into different MSMEs, working into engineering space. I ran a shop floor for 2.5 years. I realized what are the pain points that they would have, how things really become difficult for them. And after this assessment, I realized that probably it's time to gain something more. And I decided to join IBM. I worked with IBM into a software group, then the business was sold to Deso, so moved to Deso. And final stint was with SAP India. SAP India was the time when I got an overview of the complete organization and how the enterprise systems really work. But then I realized that this limited, if I look at in India, we have got almost about 6.3 million companies. Out of them, how many of them are really using SAP and the real advantage of them? So there was a far larger chunk outside this, which was perfect for them to get some understanding of SMEs. So I stepped out of SAP with an understanding that the knowledge that I've gained from these larger corporations is something that I will pass on to the smaller enterprises. And that journey has been continuing for last 6 years. There have been some amazing learnings and we are trying to do our level best to make an impact.
Wow. Like Steve Jobs said, right? The point that you mentioned. You cannot connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking backwards, right? And
Absolutely.
The great story that he mentioned about the 3 dots. Really like the way you mentioned that, you are a mechanical engineer by qualification because your cousin was a mechanical engineer. I think most of the listeners will be able to connect it, especially those who are in India, because we typically get influenced by the family members, right? It's amazing that you did sales, you did shop floor for a couple of years. IBM, SAP, and it is really great to see that you moved into this entrepreneurship. So, Charu, please describe the transition from the typical IBM SAP corporate world into entrepreneurship. How was it to be on the other side of the table now for you?
The shifting from corporate career to the SME or the entrepreneurship happened in two stages. The first stage, when I stepped out of SAP, I looked at the opportunity of joining with an old audit firm. And together we explored the opportunity of reaching out to multiple clients. So the idea was basically to build on what the audit firm is doing and then gain different access to the client, because that was perfectly possible with the audit firm, and then try and see what is the value add that we can do. So in this process, we worked with clients like L&T, Siemens, most of the cement companies in India, Birla Group, pharma companies. So we could create a lot of value for them. However, then still, this particular access was limited to only one particular set of clients. So in order to reach out to a further wider client, that's when I decided to step out and start this firm called Suhrud Consultants. It's around a 4-year-old firm now. And we have been working with a variety of clients, primarily onto the SME space. So some of them are startups, some of them are into production services side, early stage startups, to certain companies which are operational for about 20 years. So that's a nice mix that has happened over last 4 years. And the transition happened a lot at the personal level also, because when you work with a corporate and when you are dealing with professionals, you expect them to have certain basic understanding and execute certain specific behavior. But when you start discussing about the SMEs, people come with a lot of prejudice, particularly around consultants as well, because they don't really get good experience from consultants. So when you go and tell them that you are a consultant, then they will first look at you and then see, is this guy really going to do something additional, or he's just one of those guys who is going to raise the bill at the end of the month. So that's one thing that where we face challenges. So we were able to overcome these challenges by delivering consistent value to multiple clients. So that happened. And at the personal level also, I realized that probably we need to be more into educative role, more of the information sharing role, educating the promoters to certain level before we can actually go and discuss with them regarding specific consulting part. So that evolution has happened at the individual level as well as the overall company strategy.
That's quite interesting and as well as inspirational at the same time. And I think based on your experience of looking at the client struggling to get proper guidance and all, and that you have modeled into a business altogether. And rather than calling it as a business, I see that noble intention and the purpose that with which it has started is something which takes a lot of predominance here. All right, so shifting gears slightly and talking about the current pandemic situation, and it has impacted our GDP, it has impacted our inflation and all, right? So how do you see this Indian economy recovering, Charu, in your opinion, based on the study that you have done so far?
This is something that is absolutely unprecedented. So if you look at a similar situation, this has happened only around 100 years back, and the world was quite different then. So today is a connected world. So the impact from one geography to other geography moved very fast. So that happened, the pandemic created, and at some point in time, under the naturally the people pressure, wherein lives matter compared more to the industry, there was a decision to go for a lockdown. And this happened worldwide, particularly in India. That was sudden, but that saved lives. But that has created a lot of challenges for people who are into smaller businesses, because they were never really prepared for this. The larger companies create something called as a business continuity plan. They would understand how things would happen. There would be a proper framework. There would be backups created. They would have the IT infrastructure, and everything is there. But for a smaller entrepreneur, he's always very comfortable dealing with somebody. Based on how an individual walks into his cabin, he will really know what's the question that his fellow is going to ask, whether he has done the job or not. So SMEs, the smaller businesses, tend to be far more people-centric compared to the process-centric. And that was one of the challenges that MSMEs faced. They were always planning for the incremental revenue, because numbers before that were looking good. There was an expected boom in the economy. The government was talking about becoming the third largest economy in the world, and everything was going on a positive side before all of a sudden everything was stopped. So this was a shocker, and a lot of people actually struggled at that point in time to really understand how this impact should be assessed in first place. And that's what led to my first book, wherein I wrote a book called Surviving 2020, just to help people understand how they should systematically assess the impact of COVID on their business. And I conducted sessions for more than 1,000 corporates, through variety of industry associations. So we did it with the chemical industry, manufacturing industry, a startup ecosystem. So we ran multiple sessions to help people systematically understand how they would look at the impact. And once this impact was known, then people could design their own strategies to overcome this challenge. And I believe that people have adopted quite reasonably. Even the smallest of these setup changed their mindset. They started letting people work from home, and then they realized that it is fair that only the production staff comes to the office and everybody else can work from home, and still things happen smoothly. That has happened. The digital adoption happened much faster. So we were into a far better place wherein before this the second lockdown has now come. But people this time are far more prepared. So the operations continue much better compared to what happened in last March, April, and May. So this time the situation is far better. What is also helping the Indian economy right now is the fact that the entire world is now looking at India as a responsible partner. The whole thing around the vaccine Maitri, wherein we helped the smaller countries and multiple countries with the vaccine, wherein our own numbers was also a challenge, and we actually started our vaccination drive a little later compared to the other world because we were actually supplying it to them. And this whole thing has created a very positive impact globally. So people are looking at India as a responsible partner. Most of the global MNCs are now looking at opportunities for sourcing certain things from India. So the positive results are already out. One of the engineering company, which is I think at this point in time the third largest file manufacturer in the world, now already has got its order books full because people now don't want to source from China, they want to source from India. So engineering companies who have a niche are already seeing a very positive traction. Organic food is seeing a good traction. Think even on the smaller level, things like the reusable toys or wooden toys, we are going back. So that is where people are now saying how they can promote the sustainable living. What is the way for them to create more value for themselves and more value for people around them. So that's where this is improving. And if you look at the surveys which are coming in, the IMF has already predicted that India would be recovering anywhere between 8 to 12% this year. So earlier we were expecting a V-shaped recovery. That will normally be around a U-shaped recovery now. The numbers will start improving from August, and we will be back close to the annual numbers by fourth quarter. That is already happening. Along with this, the other indicator, which is a very positive indicator, is the GST collection. So GST collection is improving month on month, which primarily shows that the whole GST net is widening. More people are coming into formal ecosystem, and the biggest advantage of people coming into formal ecosystem is the availability of capital. If you see in India, right now, just about 16% of MSMEs get the formal credit. Everybody else operates through cash. Imagine, out of the whole 6.3 crore companies that we talk about, just about 16% are in the formal system. Everybody else is outside the formal system. They may do banking, but they don't get the credit. Imagine if the credit flows to these people, what's a tremendous impact it can create. So I'm very positive about it. I see a lot of traction coming in for India. People going for buying local products, and that would create tremendous opportunities for Indian MSMEs.
This is great. A lot of insights shared within short span, and I'm also optimistic about Indian companies and India recovering very quickly. And now talking a little bit about the startup ecosystem in India, like what is your opinion about Indian startup ecosystem? Because right now, if you look at the statewide initiatives, there are, for example, I'm based out of Hyderabad now, and we have this T Hub, V Hub. Likewise, government is into multiple initiatives. Karnataka has been at the forefront of supporting startups from the past and all. Yes. But what should the founders be focusing on, and what's your overall big picture view on this particular topic?
Somebody mentioned a very interesting comment to me last week. One of the CFOs, when I was meeting him, he said we are basically talking about US of 1980s. So he compared India to what US was around 1980s and how then the things exploded and then the whole revolution happened. So I really like that comparison. It's about a difference of 41 years, but still I think similarly that curve would happen. So the ecosystem is right now getting created. Is it completely ready? The answer is no. The ecosystem is still getting evolved. But there are multiple stakeholders who are trying to create an impact. Like the educational institutes, the leading educational institutes also right now have got their own entrepreneurship hubs. They are encouraging students who start something on their own. So that is happening at the premier institutions. The MBA colleges are also right now promoting different courses, so getting a lot of things around how the startups can be run, what things need to happen at the startup level. They are encouraging people to join startups. So there is a qualified workforce which is coming in. The new generation who are probably not really content with doing a 9 to 6 job are also looking at some bigger challenge compared to what a normal job would offer. So there is a greater tendency towards the qualified workforce also to get into something of their own. So that is also right now helping. The challenge that I see in the whole startup ecosystem are primarily three challenges. So at a larger level, if you look at it, the availability of capital is a challenge. That is what is stated. But my personal view is that availability of capital is basically is compared to how the US looks at the startup ecosystem. So India may not really follow the same system. So that may not be a big challenge as of now, because we are more of a bootstrapped model which is building up compared to a large funding thing, right? So large funding thing is normally restricted to the Baijus of the world, wherein they talk about the big game, whereas the others mostly are dealing into the bootstrap and then building up a model. Something like a Zerodha is probably more of a benchmark for Indian companies compared to a Baijus. So that is, if you compare the different two companies and appreciate the difference between the two, a lot of people will like to, in India, to create a Zerodha rather than creating a Baijus. So this is what is building up. So that one thing is building up. The second point that I see is a lot of incubators are coming in India. So that's a very positive sign. So there is a professional help which is available. Things like Founders Institute which is coming in, opening up multiple centers. So that one thing is happening. And the third and a very significant thing which is happening is a NASSCOM initiative called product management. So NASSCOM has right now created an initiative wherein they are encouraging a lot of people to start managing the products. So their idea is to create almost about 10,000 product managers. Because if you want to really these startups to create a value, or even the valuation for that matter, that would come from the products that you are developing. If you just become a services startup, then you are just like any other company. So Infosys started much earlier, so they have gone to a certain level. But Infosys also has got its own pinnacle, right? So somewhere we need to look at developing more products, and more are the products that are getting generated. It is far easier to reach out to a wider audience and create a far bigger impact globally compared to doing the services. So that's one thing which is happening. So NASSCOM initiatives like the product management coupled with the availability of capital and the incubators would create a very significant impact into the Indian startup ecosystem.
Thank you, Charu. I liked those two analogies, US of 80s, and appreciate the three components that you highlighted: NASSCOM, product management, and the professional help through number of incubators, and of course the most important one, the fund capital. So continuing on that fund aspect, how can Indian startups address these funding challenges? Like, if you are in West Coast, in Bay Area, you have that in a way structured approach already established. So you can have your own flexible model, but at the end the structure is always there. Same is the case if you are in Tel Aviv, in Israel as well, because you have that ecosystem little more matured, I would say.
Yes.
How about India? Great to note that you talked about 6.3 million companies which are in that SMSC segment. But how to take care of these funding challenges from end-to-end perspective?
Okay. So I would divide this funding challenges at three different levels. The first would be the smaller credit, the smaller MSMEs. For the smaller MSMEs right now, the government is bringing in a lot of things like the Startup India schemes or stand-up schemes which are available specifically for women. Then there are grants up to almost around 50 lakhs available for if you want to start some smaller, more employment friendly or more employment generating initiatives like the agro-tourism, or if you want to get into even the smallest of things like the manufacturing of essence sticks. So these are the smaller initiatives wherein you can get funding up to 50 lakhs and you can start. That's a good amount to start these kind of initiatives. So at the smallest of the level on the manufacturing side, wherein the employment generation would be much on the higher side, the sources ideally should be things like Mudra loan or a Stand-up India scheme, or the different loans available through SBI or government schemes. That is one approach. Secondly, when you look at the startups, there is a challenge because not many startups have a very detailed plan which is prepared for them. And so what they do is that they have a concept, and based on this concept, they start working. So they don't really, once they start working, they create some kind of a model. They want to go and sell it to the client. At this point in time, a lot of people automatically want to start looking for funding without having a proper minimum viable product in place, or without even having a client in place. So just because they have an idea and they have created some presentations around it or some services around it, that's a point in time wherein people want to raise the money. I believe that is something that's not going to happen in India. The days of you getting the funding or even the angel funding purely based on a concept, are probably gone. So right now what people would look at is that you need to have a minimum viable product. Your business case needs to be proved for you to get that funding. So what I would recommend is that when you are starting any enterprise or when you want to launch a startup, the founding people need to create an action plan of what would be the timeline for them to create a minimum viable product, when can they get the first order, and what would be the time for them to take care of their monthly expenses from the revenue that they are generating. Once they create this financial plan, and then they look at how they are going to raise these funds, and then they raise these many funds and run the operations till the time the minimum viable product is proved, it is accepted by a customer, and then they keep building on the top of it. That's a point in time they can get sufficient capital, whatever that they need, because the product is proven, the initial challenges are also clear. So both the things would happen. So for the startups, I would suggest that they need to get the minimum viable product and the first customer on their roll before they should go for the funding. The third challenge which is coming in, that's onto the existing MSMEs and who are under tremendous trouble. So in India, almost around 90% of the MSMEs are impacted. So the revenue loss is anywhere between around 15% to in certain cases it is even as high as about 85%. So there has been a very significant drop in revenue. And because there is a drop in the revenue, there is no cash to manage the cash flow. So what needs to happen for them is that they need to look at things like the emergency credit line scheme, or there is a new restructuring scheme which is launched by RBI. So what is going to happen under these schemes is the government will look at that even if your account was NPA just before the lockdown, or it turned into NPA during the lockdown, you can go and approach the bank and ask them to restructure your account, and they will give you about 30% of the loan that you are already asking for. So if you look at, if you are operating within a working capital of 1 crore and you get additional 30 lakhs, which means that practically your requirement for next 2 months is taken care of, or at least you would be able to revive the business for next 2 months. And then with this particular amount, you can start producing, sell it to the client, work with the right payment terms and get more money, and your business can start resuming. So that's what can happen. So the government schemes can be utilized perfectly for starting at if you are starting a manufacturing startup, which will have more employment impact, or if you are a startup, then you need to prepare on your home. And if you are already suffering from the challenges, then you need to get your house in order, go for the schemes like emergency credit line for you to get back on track.
Amazing. I really liked that framework that you talked about. Continuing on that, I know you wrote that book about how to make that working capital work for you. I might not be exactly mentioning the title, but yeah. So let's talk about that book. What exactly you covered in that book of working capital working for you?
This is a challenge that I observed in last 9 months or so, particularly after the pandemic, when we started interacting with multiple companies. What we realized is that because they were expecting a lot of orders to come their way, they kept on getting unsecured money. And this unsecured money came at anywhere between about 2% per month to 3% per month, which will practically mean that you will end up paying about 30% to 40% higher in a year's time. And what that led to a situation wherein the entire profit got eroded by this incremental cost of capital. And all these companies ended up doing was they had to work, produce everything, get the money just to ensure that they are actually repaying the loans. So there was really no valuation that was getting generated for this promoter. So promoter is putting in his own money. He has put in his time for 3, 4, 5 years to create this business. But even after putting these many years, he actually ends up earning all the money for the lender and not for himself. With that particular challenge being experienced across so many sectors, that's what I said, like, let me look at a topic wherein I can help these people with a framework as to how they can systematically optimize their working capital and work within the limits that they have, so that they ensure that the capital that they are deploying makes money and it comes to their bank account rather than to the lender's account.
Again, amazing thought process. And in fact, we need to appreciate you going ahead and launching a book, not for commercial purpose, but just as a means to help someone who is struggling in that field. So kudos to you, Charu.
Thank you.
And this has been great conversation so far. And let's add some spice by asking a few interesting rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Absolutely.
Okay, so probably you can answer these questions really quick in less than 2 to 3 words or so.
Sure.
As quick as possible. And here comes my very first bullet. What is the most adventurous thing that you have done so far?
Marriage.
We'll share this episode with your wife. What is your favorite failure, Charu?
Failure to cope up to the corporate culture.
Oh my God. That's bang on. If you were to rename yourself, what would it be?
That would be a good friend. Suhrud, that's my son's name. So that is something that I would like to rename myself.
Awesome. And I think this is a wrong question to be wrong person, but I would like to still go ahead with it. How would you spend $1 million in 10 days?
$1 million in 10 days, I would be investing them. Investing them on two parts. One is the experience with the family, travel around the world for 10 days, and half of that would get into the SME fund.
Awesome. So, yeah, great answer so far. One last one for the rapid fire. What is the best gift that you have ever received so far from someone?
That's my daughter.
Superb. So, fantastic rapid fire, and thanks for the spirit. And over to you, Sudhakar.
Thank you, Naveen. So Charu, this has been an amazing conversation. Really appreciate you providing that broader perspective of startup ecosystem, especially focusing in India in this pandemic situations. So one final question for this session is, what will be your one piece of advice to those aspiring to make big in their respective startups?
Belief. I think the biggest thing that people need at this point in time is belief, because there are so many negative news that are around. We are seeing some success story, we are seeing some challenges. People are changing, people are going through very different set of challenges at individual level. So those things get reflected in their behavior when they come to the office or when they come to the virtual meetings. So some point in time, a lot of time the faith is shaken. So the most important thing that any entrepreneur now needs to have is the belief in the fact that he is trying to make a difference and he's going to really contribute. So if he believes in his cause, he'll be able to make that impact.
Amazing. With that great note that, believe in yourself. Thank you so much for joining us today, Charu. We really appreciate your open and candid conversation. And I think this rapid fire is something that is icing on the cake, I would say. It was indeed great to talk to you about the overall startup ecosystem and specifically on optimizing the funds. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It was amazing to interact with you. I've been listening to your podcast and they have been making a very great difference. So I'm really happy to be able to contribute to this. And I look forward to more conversations with you again.
That would be our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely would like to have you again and again. And thanks again for the wonderful insights.
Thank you.
All right. So it brings us to the trivia segment of today's episode. And today's trivia is about tech acquisition. So folks, here comes the question. What is the biggest tech acquisition so far in the history? I know you are thinking, but let me tell you. It is the Dell's buyout of EMC in the year 2015 is one of the biggest tech acquisitions. And I think it was sold for $67 billion in cash and stock. That particular buyout stands to be the largest buyout so far, and it took place in 2015. Interesting, isn't it? Thank you for listening. There is more in store, folks. Stay tuned. Take care. Be safe. Until next time. Bye-bye. And we are signing off for today. We'll see you all in the next episode. Thank you.